it's a good plan to leave a couple of lines after every answer. Not only does it block your work so that the marker can actually see where your solution has finished, but it actually does allow you, if you go back when you're checking your work, if you realise you need to annotate your work with something, you've got a little bit of space for it, so you're not cramping things around your solutions. That's a good thing to do as well. After you finish the very first question that you've done, so you've gone into the exam, you've decided that you're going to work question 1 first, and you've gone all of the parts, you're ready to start question 2, go back and do part A again. Because in the stress of the examination, you're going to find that that's the question you will probably make silly mistakes with. So if you go back and just check that one, you may realise you've done something wrong and you can correct it really quickly. Do it at the end of the first question so that you don't forget to do that. Often it's just the silly mistake, the doing 2 + 2 and getting 5 instead of 4. Don't forget to show all of your working, and make your working and any diagrams an important part of your solution. Not postage stamp size at the side, but something that's a good, decent size. If you've got a diagram, make it about 1/3 of a page in size so that you can annotate it and add any information to it. Remember, your diagrams are an important part of your working, so make them important by the space you give them. Also, in writing your solutions, often you're going to find things that you need to cross out. I did that wrong, doesn't look right, like it's going to work. So don't use correction pen or fluid. That's something that will actually obliterate what you've written. And you actually do want the examiner to be able to see what you wrote. Put a simple line through it, because in the event that you've crossed everything out and you haven't replaced it with something, the examiner will read what you had crossed out and award you marks if it hasn't been replaced, if you've got something there that's worth giving you marks for. So if you have replaced it, they're going to read what you have replaced, but make certain they can still go back and have a little look to see how your thinking's gone. If you have replaced it, cross out the solution you don't want them to mark, so it's very clear what your final decision was actually on that question. Read the question carefully. Sometimes the question will ask you to do more than one thing. So make certain as you're reading the question, if it says do this and do that, highlight the and make certain that you go back and read that you've answered both bits. Check out the numbering system. I'll show you a copy of the paper later on, but just remember that the numbering system is giving you hints about how it works. So if you're working on question A and then you've got part 1 and you work through that, and then you have part 2, the very fact that they've labelled it with an I and a double I indicates that this is probably connected to that in some way. In last year's HSC paper, that's the 2010 paper, the last question had a number of questions that were all interconnected to each other. So look at the numbering system, because it will give you a little bit of a hint as to how the questions are running. Read the question, do the question, read the question again is always a really good mantra to have. Make certain you use the instruction words. Now there's lots of instruction words in maths that you need to be aware of. By integration by parts, by mathematical induction. So use those words to guide you with the strategy of solution that you're going to use. Sometimes the question will say hence or otherwise. Hence is telling you to look at what you just did. Now it might not be the thing that you did just before it. It might be the thing that you did 2 or 3 parts before it, because you may have developed a number of different results and then all of the combined results will help you do the next part. So when it says hence or otherwise, don't just glance to the very line before, but just have a quick glance through the other parts of the question with the numbering system. The or otherwise is generally just opening it up that if you didn't see how to do it but you had another strategy, you can use it. But be aware that the hence is usually the one that's going to flow most easily and is usually the one that's not going to take as much work and as much effort. And then using. That often crops up in questions as well. If it says using this, do that, make certain you have a look at what it is they're telling you to use. Just let's have a look at last year's paper and see where those important instruction words have come into play. If we look through here, well, we need to go a little bit larger. Express this in that form. Make certain you actually answer the question that they're asking. Write down the coordinates. Write down generally says we don't need to see any working. Just give us the answer. Everything will be fine. If the answer alone will award you the mark. Here, explain why. Explain why means you can use words and diagrams as well as mathematical symbols. You don't just have to be restricted to words alone. And then it says using part B. So it's actually not just looking at the question you're dealing with, but with a part that you did earlier on in the paper. So the examiner's actually giving you instructions and giving you hints as to where to go and look to see what you're doing. Use the marking scheme as a guide as well. If the question is only a 1 marker, it's telling you that you're only going to be doing a few simpler processes. It's not necessarily in Extension 2 just one process, because in Extension 2 the marks are hard to get. But it does mean that it's going to be an easier question to answer than something that's worth more. If something's worth 4 marks and you've only really done one thing, it's telling you that there's a lot more to do here. Okay, so use the marking scheme as a guide to tell you how much working you need to put in. When you're proving something, set your work out systematically and logically. Go down the page, use some connecting words, throw around some things like substitute, okay, using the result of. Put little marks on your page like an asterisk and say from the little asterisk so you can actually annotate your own work and the reader can actually read something that flows logically. And don't falsify your working. Sometimes you're working on something and they've given you the answer. In a show that question, they say show that x equals this. And you've got a plus where the question has a minus. And so what the great temptation is to go back and to just go through and change all of those minuses to make it look as if you got the right answer. Well, often when a student does that, they're making a second error deliberately to correct the first error. And that's never going to be good. The person marking your page actually knows what the answer is, so they're not going to be tricked at all by those sorts of techniques. Don't do it. If you didn't get the answer and you have a minus where there should be a plus, or you've got a 4 where there should be a 2, just leave it. If you've only made one mistake, you've only made one mistake. But then, don't use your wrong result in subsequent questions. So if they said prove that x is this plus this, and you've got a minus, and then it says hence prove this, use what they had in subsequent working, because otherwise you know it's not going to work out because you already had something wrong to begin with. In circle geometry, make certain that you've got some colouring in pencils in your pencil case before you go in the exam, because colour will help you highlight the different things within the diagram. Don't sit there constructing the diagram if the question says copy the diagram onto your exam or your writing booklet. Use the trace technique. Overlay, trace it out quickly. They're not going to give you marks for the diagram. The diagram is only there to help you flow through your logic and for them to see how your logic has flowed. Turn the page around, as I've said, that will give you a different perspective, and don't make up your own abbreviations. Use standard abbreviations, not your own hieroglyphics. And if you're not certain if it's a standard abbreviation, use the full word. Use the word alternate instead of alt if you're not familiar with, or if you're not certain about the abbreviation. Now with integration, there's a lot of writing in integration, so you can avoid writing and you can save yourself a little bit of time by replacing the integral sign with a capital I and then referring back to it. Don't forget you've got the standard integrals on the back page, so if you have a mind blank, flip over to the back, have a quick read, see what's there, and then come back to your question. That's like the answer section. Don't forget in substitution, if there are definite integrals, make sure you change the limits. If it's an indefinite integral, make certain that you go through and change back to your original variable. So with diagrams, put them in your writing booklet. The great temptation is to just draw them on the exam's questions sheet, but remember you're walking out of the exam with that. So any diagrams you need to do, any fiddle diagrams, put them in your actual working booklet. And make sure things are large enough for the examiner to actually read what you're writing. Okay, what happens when you get that question and you haven't got a clue? You look at it, your heart rate's going up, you just need to breathe deeply, think calmly. If you've got no idea, write down what you do know. Sometimes just the process of making a summary of the question starts to trigger some information in your head. Make a summary of the facts that are given. Draw a diagram perhaps. Just experiment, play, but don't spend too much time on it. Move on. Move on and come back later. But don't forget, while you're through this 3-hour experience, you are going to start to experience levels of stress you may not have experienced before. Be aware of what your body actually does when you do get stressed. I usually get really rosy cheeks. I get really sweaty palms, and I start to feel a little bit queasy in the stomach. You need to know how you respond so that when those signals come to you, you can start to do the relaxation thing and you can start talking sense to yourself, talking positive things to yourself. Speak positive things so that when a question comes out, give yourself the high five. Yay, I got that one. The good thing about the Extension 2 exam is they often have questions that say, show that blip. Well, if you did, celebrate. Make certain that you're giving yourself those positive things. It's a tough paper. It's hard work. You're doing the hardest level of mathematics there is in Australia. Celebrate. Don't keep tallies of the questions you didn't do or the marks you didn't get. There's a temptation in the Extension 2 test to go through and think, oh, I didn't do that, I didn't do that, I didn't do that either, oh, I'm going to fail. And your stress level starts to increase because you're looking at what you can't do. In the Extension 2 paper, what you can do is good enough. And you need to keep reminding yourself, it is hard. There are going to be questions you've never seen before in your life. And whatever you do is enough. You don't have to get 100%. In fact, students who do half of the paper come out with good results at the end because it's acknowledged that it is such a challenging paper for you to do. Don't set a mark that you're aiming for. Some students, when I've worked on the HSC advice line, have phoned in and asked the question, what percentage should I be getting in my trial practice papers to be assured of getting a band 4 or assured of getting a mark that's over 90? Well, we can't really tell you that. And to work that way is actually doing things back to front, because it's only after the paper has been done by the students that the judges then make a decision about its degree of difficulty. So don't set yourself up for feeling really stressed by saying I've got to get 80% of the paper done, or I've got to get 90% of the paper done, or I've got to get 20% of the paper done. Just go in and do the best you can, because the best you can under the circumstances is the best you can, and then you'll be able to get the mark that you deserve. So don't stress out about that.